Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. This time it's Reaper Picks Volume 8. What I'm going to be covering today are 5 overrated and 5 underrated books. This was actually a suggestion by a viewer by the name of Sam Bartola in the comments of my recent eBay watch list video, and I thought it was a pretty interesting topic. I might actually do a second part of it. Basically, I have 5 books that I think are a little overrated, and I have 5 books that I think are underrated. And they're overrated and underrated for various reasons, and I'll explain in the video. Some in greater detail, some in not so great detail. But this is not like a top 5 or a top 5 overrated or a top 5 underrated books. It's just books that are in my collection that I think that sometimes are a little overrated or underrated. So once again, before I start showing them, this is just my opinion. This doesn't mean that the books that I chose here are actually overrated or underrated. Everybody has different opinions about certain books, so please keep that in mind. Try not to get offended if I have your Grail book I'm showing off and I'm saying it's overrated. It's to each his own, but these are just my thoughts. So what I'll do is I'll start out with an overrated book, and then I'll go to an underrated book, and I'll just use that formula until the video is over, okay? So here is one book that I think is a little overrated. We'll start it off with this one. NYX number 3, the first appearance of X-23. Don't get me wrong, any character that is like Wolverine is a cool character. I just think that the character, in my opinion, is just a little overrated. I don't think the character is as good as she's projected to be, in my opinion. I always prefer, when it comes to Wolverine, I prefer the original Wolverine, no copy of him. And that's just the way I feel about it. Now here's a book I think is a little underrated. X-Men 94. You might say, wait a minute, how is that an underrated book? It's expensive, and it's obviously liked. It's obviously well received by X-Men fans and comic book fans. The reason why I say it might be just a little underrated is because it's definitely second fiddle to Giant Size X-Men. And I think that it's underrated because it doesn't get enough credit as it should. It, to me, is a very, very important book. When I came back to the hobby, now, like I said, this is just my opinion on these things, the way I see it. Doesn't mean it actually is or isn't. But when I came back to the hobby, that was one of the first books I wanted to get because I always knew the significance of it. It's the first time the new X-Men appear in the X-Men title after 5 years of reprints. And I think a lot of people tend to go for the giant size, rightfully so too, because I think it is a better book. But somewhere in there, I think it's sometimes just a little forgotten about every now and then. Now here is another overrated book, and I've talked about this in previous videos. House of Secrets 92. Don't get me wrong, excellent artwork on the cover and inside, but I still have a lot of trouble understanding why why the book has been climbing. Now I know recently a TV show that's supposed to appear on, I don't know, a network or something like that, or Netflix or something like that. I don't know the full details of it. Maybe you can fill me in on the comments. But I know Swamp Thing has been, this book has been climbing a lot over the last year. And don't get me wrong, I think it's a great book. It's obviously very important to me. I wouldn't have it. But I just think sometimes it's a little overrated. It's really, we talked about this on the Wednesday chat too. Swamp Thing, although a pretty cool character, he's nowhere near as popular as some other characters in the DC universe, so I just don't understand it too much. Now here's a book that's underrated, I feel. Savage Tales number 1. It's the first appearance of Man-Thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think Man-Thing is a popular character, to say the least. It's funny, though. I think Man-Thing inspired Swamp Thing. For me, though, I still sometimes think that this book is a little neglected by a lot of fans. I think it's a pretty cool book. The artwork inside, I think, is really good. And Man-Thing, liking Man-Thing is like liking the Friday the 13th series, that movie series. Man-Thing is certainly not a very good character, and neither of the Friday the 13th movies are not very good movies. But it's almost like what I call a guilty pleasure. You just like to watch those movies, and you just like to see Man-Thing in some of these issues, because I think it is a pretty well-drawn character. I do. But I think everything else falls a little, short. Here's an overrated book, in my opinion. Werewolf by Night 32, the first appearance of Moon Knight. I know Moon Knight has a very, very loyal following, and hey, I'm not insulting your guy, okay? But for me, and this is another book, sort of like House of Secrets 92, that's been climbing and climbing, waiting for somebody to announce that Moon Knight's going to appear in a movie, and it was recently. I think he's going to appear in a Marvel, the next phase of Marvel movies or something like that. To what degree, I don't know. As a secondary character in his own movie, who knows? But for years, this book has been climbing and climbing. And like I said, don't get me wrong, Moon Knight's an okay character, but in my opinion, I don't see what the big deal about him is. And I think there was a lot of emphasis on this book for a long time, and it just, to me, is a little overrated. Here is an underrated book, but I think now it's starting to definitely climb. Fantastic Four 48. Now, we all know the significance and the importance of Fantastic Four 48, so some may argue, well, how could you say that's an underrated book? I say it was an underrated book because I think for many years it just was at a plateau. It was part of the introduction of a major Marvel character, the Silver Surfer, and also one of Marvel's, in my opinion, one of their most intriguing story arcs. And granted, it has value, no doubt, in any grade, but I think for a while it was just neglected in favor of other books. So that's why I think it was a little underrated for a while. But now I think people are starting to come to it and see that there's potential in the book, and it's going to, I think, climb up. Now here's an overrated book. Now don't get me wrong, this next one, let me explain. Amazing Spider-Man 300, the first appearance of Venom. I do not believe that this book is overrated because of the character Venom or the story or anything like that. I think that the introduction of Venom and the story in this book of introducing Venom, the character of Venom and all that stuff, I think is very important in the Spidey universe. And I would hardly say that Venom is not an important character. I think he is, and I think it's great. The only reason why I say this book is a little overrated is because of the cover. Once again, I think it's a pretty neat cover, but I never understood the fascination with the cover and why this book gets so many cover swipes. Is it drawn well? Is Spider-Man drawn well? Is the background drawn very well? Yeah, I would definitely say so. But other than that, it's just a cover with a bunch of 300s on it. For me, once again speaking for me, I never really understood the allure of all the cover swipes that are out there of this particular book. It's just something I just don't get. And that's the only reason why I say this book is overrated. Other than that, I think Venom, very important character. The story arc that introduced him, very important. Definitely not overrated. I think very well deserved. Just that the cover is just like, it's a memorable one, but I don't see what the big deal is about it. I really don't. I remember when I got this book, very happy to have it because I liked Venom. But I remember that the cover, I've always felt was just a little disappointing. I've always felt that the Amazing Spider-Man 316 was the better cover. It was the first Venom cover, but I just always thought that was a nicer looking cover. Okay, here is another underrated book, I feel. I'm going to the Golden Age, and here we have 4-color 178, the first appearance of Uncle Scrooge. Is it a valuable book? Sure. Do people like Uncle Scrooge and want this book? Absolutely. But I still think that in the world of comic books, that this book sometimes is forgotten. Is it as nearly as popular as other books, like in the Marvel Universe and DC? No, of course not. But I still think, though, it doesn't get enough attention as it deserves, because I think that Uncle Scrooge was an important introduction that was made in comic books. Appeared first time in comic books. The characters like Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse, although they have their first comic book appearances, just like Boba Fett, they originally did not show up in comic books. They were on the big screen. This is the first time that Uncle Scrooge showed up, and his first appearance was in the comics, and that's why I feel that sometimes it's a little underrated. The last overrated book for this haul, and then I'll get to the last underrated one, is this. Oh, come on. We could say that the artwork is great. There's no argument there with Neil Adams' cover and all that stuff, but don't you kind of agree that Jimmy Olsen 134, the cameo of Darkseid, is a little overrated? I mean, he shows up at the end of the issue on a TV monitor or a screen, and that is his cameo. Okay, fine, but why people flock to this book over... If you're ever a Darkseid fan, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Darkseid. I'm not insulting anybody's opinion that, hey, what's wrong with Darkseid? Nothing. I'm just saying that why people flock to this book, why this one has more value than Forever People, I'll never know. It's just a little cameo appearance, and it's not even a very good cameo appearance. I think for any Darkseid fan, maybe one would think that Forever People, the first full appearance of Darkseid, like Incredible Hulk 181, the first full appearance of Wolverine, would be the more valuable one. It's not. It seems to be the opposite with this one, and I just don't understand it, and I think it's a little overrated. And the very last one of this video, as for the fifth underrated book, I think is this one. Strange Tales 205, the first appearance of Deadman. Like I said, people know who Deadman is. He's got his own following. It can be a pricey book, but I don't think Deadman... It really gets a lot of attention, as maybe not as he deserves, because it is still Deadman. It's not necessarily a A-list character, but I do think that there's some sort of uniqueness to him, especially coming from the DC universe, and I think sometimes he's overlooked. And that's why I would say that Strange Tales 205, although it can be pricey, is sometimes a little underrated. Well, that's my latest Reaper Picks video. I probably would do another one of these. To me, it's easier to find, in my collection at least, underrated books, because there were so many that I picked out that I wanted to include in this video. That's why I said maybe I'll do a sequel. Now I have to really think about it and look at some other books to see what overrated ones there are. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and take care. Bye-bye.